Well. Well. It appears that you have in fact completed Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Yeah, but I'm not going to do a review because... Silence! Don't you know who I am, fool? No, mate, sorry. I am Farseer. Fitz Chivalry. Farseer. Sorry. Go ahead. I, Fitz Chivalry Farseer... Come on, man, I'm trying to monologue here. I'm sorry, it's just such a stupid name. Fitz Chivalry is not a stupid...
You said it again!
You said it again. Shut up! Mate, you sound like a cracker. Not in the racist way, like the food. Oh, I do love Ritz. Really Moorish. Yes, definitely. Anyway, the man who holds you captive, oh my Christ, will force you to review this book. Nope. Tough. You have to. Nope, I don't want to. Ah, well, I predicted as much, which is why I have devised a plan that will force you to review Assassin's Apprentice. No, mate. If I admit that I didn't 100% love it in a review, they will all unsubscribe, and then I'll have to go back to eating 4 slices of toast while sitting in my pants, binge-watching Timeless on Netflix. There's nothing you could do to me. Ah, is there not? No. Perhaps a little audiobook while we wait. No, you can't. Oh, but I can. Anything but that. Please, anything but that.
Only a blank
No.
shelf. No exercise of my mind
No.
has ever been able to pierce.
No!
But on that day, they suddenly
Listen.
begin.
Hear his words.
There is nothing.
That terrible accent.
With a brightness and detail that overwhelms me.
Make it
Sometimes
stop.
it seems too
Make
deep.
it stop.
And I wonder
Do you
if it is
hear
truly
it?
mine.
Do your ears bleed?
Am I recalling it from my own mind or from dozens of retellings by legions
The narrator is from Ohio.
stallions and herds of
Robin Hobb is from California.
As they explained my presence to
Is the
each other.
accent too fake for you?
Perhaps I have heard the story so many times from so
Tear
many
came to my
sources.
eye, and that tear
I
turned to
now
ice,
recall it
and I
as an
kept that
actual
frozen
memory
tear.
of my own.
Spoonful of
Is
sugar
the
goes a
detail the
long,
result of a
long
six-year-old
They've only
way.
nosed up
open
the mainframe
absorption
couplet, nosed
of
it
all
right.
that goes on
leave my
I can't feel anything anymore.
Many strange things already. Bloody wolves chasing me through some blue inferno.
Do you feel like making a review now?
One hopes it is
Please, I
not.
can't take it anymore.
The remembrance is almost physical. The chill greyness of the fading day. The remorse
Will you obey?
the icy cobble of the strange
Why?
town streets.
Why
Even
is it
the
such a
calloused roughness of the
caricature?
huge hand
Why?
that
Will you obey?
small. Sometimes I wonder about that.
Well, what say you, man? Okay. I'll do it. Good. Good. Assassin's Apprentice. My review's going to be a bit of a mixed bag, but there were things I really didn't like about it. There were things that I thought were pretty good about it. And I'm going to try and approach this review with a level of technical objectivity and why it didn't really work for me. But first, I don't like this hat, so I'm changing back. Ah, much better. I want to begin with a disclaimer because people love this book. So I just want to say that I do think it is a good book. I do think it is well written. In fact, Robin Hobb's writing, her technical writing, her prose, is quite far beyond most run-of-the-mill fantasy that I've looked at. I've read samples of loads of books that I haven't actually read because I've studied people's prose and stuff, and I actually think fantasy has a bit of a prose problem, like clunky amateur wording and overuse of filler words. Robin Hobb's writing does feel quite high bar, and on a sentence level, I think sometimes it did get in the way of the story, but overall her writing is good. At times it was quite pretty, and I don't think it was ever flowery, but it was boring. It was boring, man. I nearly DNF'd it. I've had a few conversations in my Discord about this book with other booktubers like Michael Nip, who loved it. It's not that I don't like slow-paced books, because I like the Blade itself. In fact, I love the Blade itself. And I saw other people compare Assassin's Apprentice to First Law, like a less dark version of Abercrombie. And no, I don't see that at all. It's definitely very character driven. There is a semblance of a plot. It just felt really meandering. And I think my biggest issue is that it had a lot of familiarity to The Name of the Wind, or at least the beginning of The Name of the Wind. But I think Rothfuss did it a lot better, because with Name of the Wind, you're moving from point in the life story to point in the life story, because this is a life story, 100%. It's the main character, Fitz, and he's narrating back on his life. But whereas the life story, is it a trope? Maybe it's a trope. But the whole life story type narrative tends to move from one point in time to another, and I like those kind of stories. I think they're very magical, and I think those kind of stories lend to a more intense and intimate understanding of the characters you're following. But Name of the Wind gives you that hook where you sort of know where that story's going. Whereas with this book, I didn't really understand what the point was for ages. The first 2/3 of this book, I didn't know what was supposed to be important and what wasn't. And it was slow and it was boring. The ending was quite exciting, and I did enjoy the ending, and it made me curious as to whether I would do the next book or not. It doesn't make up for how tedious I found the first 2/3. Why it's frustrating though is because it wasn't just a boring book. I didn't want to DNF it, and I didn't want to DNF it because Robin Hobb's character work is great. Fitz, he's an interesting character, and I cared about him, and I wanted to see what happened to him. I was invested in Fitz, but I found it such a slog to get there. It's not a very long book. It's not a pacing issue. It really isn't. I actually think it's a structural issue, which is why I had a problem with this. My initial thought was, oh, maybe I just don't like long chapters, because the chapters feel quite long, whereas in The Blade itself, the chapters are quite short. It's not that. It's not that, because I love Stormlight and I love Way of Kings. And some of them chapters are 30 pages or more. It is the way this story is written. Robin Hobb is a summarizer, and I don't like that. My theory is that the only reason I was invested in Fitz and his story was because it was in first person, and he is a good person, so I enjoy following him. But all she does is summarize and summarize and summarize, and you're hardly ever in a scene. And when you are in a scene, it's in the most enjoyable parts of the book, because her characters are written well and her dialogue is okay. It's not as good as Abercrombie's, although this shouldn't be a complete comparison because it is its own thing. But when elements that exist within this story I have seen done better in other stories, I can't help but compare them. And yeah, I found it to constantly be summarising over weeks and months and just entire events, and paragraphs would just be, and then this week I did this, and over the days it blah 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 blah, verbal diarrhea. I don't necessarily prefer action. I don't think I would like Rage of Dragons, because I've heard it's just fight scene after fight scene after fight scene, and that would just annoy me. That would just do my head in. I'll probably give it a go one day, but doesn't sound like my kind of thing. I like good conversations in my books. I like good dialogue and character interactions. I like my action to be sparing and earned. So when I say that this lacked action, I mean it lacked actually being present in things happening. You're being told about them. It's being summarised to you, as opposed to being in the scene and feeling the scene. And loads of my favourite books, I can think of particular scenes that I loved, particular moments from the book that I loved, and go, this was my favourite scene, or this was my favourite moment. With this, I can barely even think of moments that happened. And I've only just read it. One of my favourite scenes was a scene between... there's not going to be spoilers, but there is a scene between Fitz and a character called Verity. And they're talking in the room whilst Verity is looking out of a window. And this conversation, this scene... was one of my favourite scenes in the book because it was an actual scene. It was an actual moment that we got to be in. It wasn't Fitz just going, and I did this one day and then this one week and then this one year. We got to actually be in that moment. And I don't think there was enough scenes like that. I understand that it's not that kind of story. This is why I'm saying that I think it's a good book. And I think that it's going to work for a lot of people. And I understand why it does work for a lot of people. It just didn't work for me. I want to be present. I want to be present in the books that I'm reading. And the only way I felt even a semblance of presence and intimacy with regards to where I, the reader, was brought into this story was because it was a first-person narration. If this was a third-person narration, I would have felt so much disconnection from this book that I would have DNF'd it. I would have 100% put this book down. Because my only enjoyment, the thread that I was dangling on, was I care about Fitz. I did care about Fitz. And if I didn't, this book would have just been dead. So if you don't like slow pacing and you don't want to feel distant from the action of the story, maybe this wouldn't work for you. And if you don't like to feel distant from the action, if you're not a fan of first person and you don't like slow pacing, then I think the only way you're going to enjoy this book is if you really like the main character. And if you don't like the main character, this is not the book for you. I don't really know how I'm going to rate this. It's a tough one because I'm looking at the author's intention. I'm looking at why people like it. Whereas when I read other books, I like to tear apart the writing, criticise why I think it didn't work. But here, it's difficult. I really do have mixed feelings because whilst reading it, I was feeling like it was a good book. I do think it's a good book and I think it's so well written. And I think her character work is great. I just found it really boring. And I read long books, man. One of my favourite books is The Way of Kings. And The Way of Kings has 500 pages of nothing happening. And I loved every minute of it. This is not a big book. I feel like if it takes me this long to read such a small book because it's so boring to me, then I shouldn't keep doing it because it's just going to be a waste of my time. Because I could read The First Law and bosh through it. I could read some more Sanderson epics and I could just tear through them. And it's not that I don't like slow pacing, because I've read plenty of books that have slow pacing, and as I've said before, I don't always hate it. It really depends. There are various pillars to a story. I can forgive one of them being missing if one of them's really good. So if you've got beautiful prose, like Rothfuss, I can forgive that your character's a bit of a dick. If you've got amazing characters, like in The First Law, I can forgive that your pacing is quite slow, because I'm not going to be bored, because every time they're talking and thinking, I'm engaged. And Fitz being an interesting character did save this book from being DNF'd by me. But please, understand that reviews are subjective, opinions are varied. Just because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it wouldn't work for you. And I am in the minority here. Most people love this book. So don't even listen to me. Go and read it, try it for yourself. But if you don't like the character after the first 100 pages and you're finding it slow and boring, yeah, put it down. Pick something else that you actually like up, because the ending was good, but I'm not eager to move on to the next one. I'm going to finish the trilogy, I think. Maybe. But it's definitely not at the top of my list, because my TBR is longer than how many years I have left alive. If you want some different opinions about this book, go check out Michael Knipp's review of Assassin's Apprentice, or Leanna's Library's review, because they don't agree with me and they both had good, interesting points to make. Yeah, that was my Assassin's Apprentice review. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe to support my channel. Hit the notification bell so you know when I've uploaded. Follow me on Instagram because I post stories most days. And join the Discord and we can all have discussions together. Come into the server and we can talk about whether you loved or hated this book. You can completely and utterly tear apart my opinions. Do it. Come. You are welcome. It just didn't work for me. Peace.